Welcome to Industrializing the Commonwealth. Here, we're going to be looking at the facility built at the Slog that acts as a recycling plant. This will provide raw materials for building many of the things we'll need in industrializing the Commonwealth, as well as all sorts of consumer products that will be desired as well. One of the most important materials in building things is going to be steel, but the game already gives us the Saugus Ironworks, which is still functional. All we have to do is use the Brotherhood of Steel and take it back over and keep the raiders from coming back. So the Slog is just up the street, and it made a very good site for producing the other raw materials that we'll be using. So let's take a look at the Slog recycling plant. The existing structure out front will have several purposes. The first of which, when you first go in, is going to be the retail store. Here, they buy scrap as well as sell raw materials in small quantities. These are some of the raw materials that they can sell. So cement, concrete, different types of metals, fabrics, yarns, plastics, glass. Most of the materials in the game that are not steel. In the first room, we have storage of scrap materials that have been purchased and that are going to be recycled. So here they're sorted into bins. We have ceramics, aluminum, we also have cloth, plastic, and glass. And then assorted other items that will be disassembled.
Huh? Yes?
The next room acts as storage for production that's not going to be shipped immediately.
Yeah?
On this side are facilities for the employees. We have a lounge and break room.
Yeah?
Yeah? Huh?
And of course, a bathroom as well. As we go out the back, we can see the heart of the operation. Production has been split between these two large buildings on the right and the left. Raw materials come into the right side, they're processed, they go across on conveyor belts into the left side where production into the raw materials is finished. Materials can be brought in from the main building, or they can be driven right up and unloaded in a loading dock outside. In either case, materials will go through the same process along the same system. They'll go through these sorters, separating out different types of materials for different sorts of processing. As they go through, they're lifted into these bins and the processing begins. And of course, the construction robots we have are also good for shooting down flies. Once the initial processing in this building is done, we have 4 different conveyor belts to take the raw materials of the second building where the final processing is done.
It's nuts.
In the first building, I used objects exclusively from the contraptions workout, just builders, conveyor belts. In the second building, I mixed in some of the industrial machinery to give it a little bit of variety in what it was doing at the final processing steps. This room just off the main building I've left mostly untouched, except for adding a few file cabinets. This still has the computer, it basically acts as the main office. It's just record keeping, shipments, things like that. This small building is essentially a warehouse for outgoing deliveries. So we have a loading bay for the pickup trucks, and then just a small storage space.
What just happened? Not hiding this time.
Now that the sun is starting to go down, I want to show you how I set up the power grid here. This was probably one of the longest parts of the build, because I had a few things that I wanted to do that were relatively complex. So as you might have noticed, I have a small nuclear generator in each building. But I wanted both buildings to be on essentially one circuit. So the way I've set this up is I take the generator and I stick the power line directly out the wall. And I'm going to run it over to the other building where I line it up with the other generator. So if you follow the lines, you can see how I've done this. I have several lines going back and forth. The back line is from the first generator and it's just going this way. I also wired this directly into the main building before I put it through any switches. Once we get over to the second building, it goes into this first conduit box and goes through a switch. The second generator, again, is wired just into a conduit box going out the back.
Huh?
Now the power line goes back into the building as well, but most importantly, it is wired back across to the first building. And it does so along the middle line across here. The line is brought back into the first building, where it's attached to both the switch as well as a logic gate. Coming off the switch, we go back to a conduit box, which goes back outside and across back over to the second building again. So now we have both buildings essentially on the same circuit for the main power. Okay, now to show what this does in terms of the power for both buildings, I'm going to flip one of the switches and you can see what happens to the lights and the machines in both buildings. So right now they're both on. I flip the switch, this building goes dark, lights go out, machines go out, that building is dark also. So the two buildings are on the same circuit. Now you might notice I have some lights that have now turned on. This is what the logic boxes in both buildings are for. I wanted a system of emergency lighting to switch on when you shut off the power. Essentially, this is an emergency stop if you need to cut all the machines. You'll still need to see what's going on, so that's what these lights are for. And the same thing happens when you flip this switch. Lights are on, flip the switch, lights go off in both buildings. And the emergency lights come on over here as well. For the emergency lights, I use the construction lights, and I place anywhere them into the walls just where I wanted them. That's why you might have noticed those the yellow tripods they stand on kind of sticking out of the walls in random places. So I have two plant-wide emergency shutdown switches. I also wanted to have an emergency shutdown just at the first section. So if you're putting in something to get processed initially, before it goes through at all, you can shut it down, or you can just shut it down to load things on the way you want them. That's this switch here. As you can see, when we throw this switch, the conveyor belts shut down, but everything else, all the other machines, all the lights, they keep running. And then I have two other switches here. These are just for the garage doors, although there is a light bulb or two attached to them as well. And the final thing I wanted to show, we're going to jump back into build mode here, and it's daytime again, but the final thing I wanted to show was how the emergency lighting system runs essentially opposite from the power for the rest of the plant. So come down here. We use these XOR logic gates Essentially what I wanted to have was a switch that just either directed power to the right or to the left. I don't think they had anything like that, so what I ended up using was an XOR gate and a switch. So if the switch is on, power is directed out from the switch. If the switch is off, then it's directed essentially twice into the XOR gate. And the way the XOR gate works is if neither of the inputs are powered, then it will send power. It's a little finicky though. I think you have to have something actually coming in that is powered, but is switched off. Otherwise, there isn't any power to power the lights or anything behind it. But that's how I did it. So coming out of the XOR gate are these separate conduits that essentially run their own system just for the emergency lights. And that's how I was able to have everything switch off and then have these emergency lights switch on. And then I have essentially the same system set up in the second building for the emergency lights over there as well. I'm not 100% sure that what I've done is the most efficient way to do it, but it got me to where I wanted to be. It, set up the lights so that they would all work together, and then you have the emergency lights on a different circuit. I thought it was kind of a cool way to do it. That was the Slog recycling plant. Thanks for watching.